Hi, everybody. How are you? Let me know in the comments since you can't really reply to me. But anyway, this book is Topper by Thorne Smith. So this is about Cosmo Topper, a mild-mannered and respectable bank manager whose whole life has been ordered down to the last detail until one day he feels drawn by a strange impulse to break free and buy a sports car that was owned by a local couple. The only problem is that the previous owners of the car were a wild living, carefree couple who died in an accident in that car, and they're still haunting it. George and Marion Kerby decide to turn Topper's life upside down, partly for the fun of it and partly because they sense it might be just what he needs. Published in 1926, the book reflects the changing of the guard between the staid and respectable generation, raised in the Victorian tradition, and the new tradition-breaking, freedom-loving generation in the Roaring Twenties. It also shows the more irreverent style of humor that was emerging, which didn't hold with the things the previous generations held sacred or with the seriousness of previous literary tradition. Where the Victorians would give us sweeping romance, a haunted mansion maybe, and safety in tradition, here all of that's turned on its head. The humor lies in the ghosts not being scary, but being actually quite immature, hard drinking, completely cheeky, and the unlikelihood of a modern vehicle being haunted. Thorne Smith was born in 1892 and died in 1934. He wrote, or is most famous for writing, humorous, supernatural fantasy fiction where supernatural characters like our ghosts here are mixed up in sex, drinking, and general playful mayhem. Teamed with racy illustrations, these were hugely popular in the 1930s and came back again in the 1950s. They were sort of rediscovered then as well. Topper and its sequels are some of the author's most well-known titles, with a 1937 film starring Cary Grant and Constance Bennett as George and Marion Kerby, being a well-loved classic movie, and more sequel films and even a TV series were made as well. His book Turnabout in 1931 inspired the book Freaky Friday, which obviously then had its own film adaptations as well. And his book The Passionate Witch, published after his sudden death in 1941, was made into the delightful Veronica Lake vehicle, I Married a Witch, where he turned the idea of witches as old and ugly and darkly malicious into beautiful, naive, and playfully malicious. This went on to inspire more characters of this ilk, so we can thank Thorne Smith for movies like Bell, Book and Candle, the TV series Bewitched and Sabrina the Teenage Witch, etc. Thorne Smith's books are eventful, though not particularly long. Each chapter gives us a new event in the whole adventure, and while there is growth in the lead character, the books aren't really about preaching personal growth or maturity and aren't particularly sentimental about it either. They're there to point out the absurdity of life and of the people around us. They're playful and irreverent and chaotic, and they can be a little bit salacious as well. Topper and Marion flirt a lot, and there's plenty of hints that Marion and George have a somewhat open marriage, at least at certain times, though they're also both childishly jealous of each other as well. I really enjoy the humor of this era, especially the kind of darker humor. The 1920s love to make fun of things that have been taken seriously for too long and to come across as youthful and unaffected by things. This led into the darker humor of the 1930s when screwball comedies were popular with their quick talking and sort of banter. And things like The Addams Family were also created around this era. The spooky was being embraced in a new way as something that could be funny or even lovable, sometimes made down to earth in some ways and not kind of held up so high, you know, rather than all of this stuff being mined for tragedy or fear. Sometimes this can be kind of startling, and I find that really, really delightful. Of course, if you're going to read any book from what is basically 100 years ago, you're most likely going to find some dated views. I can't remember off the top of my head really what they were in this book, but I have a feeling there were maybe a few things in there, you know, that would probably be could potentially be offensive to a modern reader if they're not expecting it. But I do think this kind of humor, wherever you find it, can be such a boon in modern times when often we do take things very seriously and things can be quite serious. And we're sort of living in a time where people take things very literally. There's a time and a place for that, of course, but it's also important to laugh and not take life too seriously. Not everything is trauma, and looking for the humor or even having gallows humor can be a healthy coping strategy as well. I like Thorne Smith's novels. I've watched the Topper films several times. They're very silly and chaotic, and the characters are so wild. They're a really fun ride. They pair well with a nice cocktail and a cozy night in. So, this book may not be for everyone, just because they're a little bit older, but Topper is still in print today for a reason. It's fast, unserious, and booze soaked. This is a witty story, a wild ride with a nice ending. Have you seen the Topper movie or any of Thorne Smith's movie adaptations? I'd love to hear what you think. And thank you for watching.